Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now before I start this video, it's important for me to mention that the author does not seek to discredit any previous accounts or versions of events leading up to the gruesome murders. He merely offers an interesting alternative scenario to be considered. October 1995. The afternoon briefing was taking its usual course in the clandestine branch office. Bill had been focusing more and more on a guy who was running the doors at a few of Essex's busier clubs. Over the last few months, the guy had been extremely active. His influence in the Basildon area had moved him to the top of the criminal food chain in the town. The character's name was Tony Tucker, and 1995 had been a very good year for him. Things were getting better and better. Tony Tucker had just been joined in his enterprise recently by a bear of a man called Pat Tate. Mr. Patrick Tate had been absent doing a spell at Her Majesty's pleasure when Bill first started looking at Tony Tucker. Prior to Tate, his regular sidekick was a man known as Craig Rolfe, amongst others. Rolfe was still in tow, but always going to be subordinate to Tate and Tucker. The latter was clearly the brains of the outfit, the former was now the brawn. Although Tucker wasn't far behind in those attributes himself. Tucker's life was a mix of partying and business. He was making money legitimately from his security business and a lot more illegitimately from the drugs sold on the premises he minded. The now infamous Raquel's nightclub in Basildon being one of his many venues. Bill had listened carefully to what DS Wright and Bale had to say on their favourite candidates during the afternoon roundtable discussion. It was business as usual in Essex for the Crims and their dealers. The other two in the office had been doing a bit of camera work. Various mugshots were passed around. The usual squabbles over money, a couple of fights in Romford, nothing much out of the ordinary. The local Metropolitan guys had a result the week before on some cocaine in a reasonable quantity. The incident was in Chadwell Heath. A couple of mid-level guys who had been failing motor traders were now looking down the barrels of a long sentence each. The team knew that some of the intel had to have come from their work. No glory for the boys in the shadows. But that was how it was. Bill had gotten used to it by now. He was starting to see the bigger picture. Bill's turn came to discuss his players in the Essex crime scene and how they were performing, what they had planned, and any crossover with the other players. Well, Tucker's doing really well, and the new guy with him, well, he's a loose cannon, shall we say. Real nasty, impatient, don't give a fuck for anyone type of guy. To be honest, he might be a bit of a problem one day. Why's that, Bill? Well, look, he's just out of the nick. His name's Pat Tate, and he's hungry, very impatient. Tucker is predictable, well, as predictable as any of this lot can be. But this Tate character, he's in a real hurry. There's a lot of anger, almost a madness in the man. He's doing a lot at the moment, the full cocktail of their products, steroids, coke, pills, the booze. He seems to flip between paranoia and outright malevolence on an hourly basis. I just think he might be a bit of a handful down the line. I mean, he certainly ain't scared of anyone. But they all blow hot and cold, Bill. You should hear some of the ranting and raging I've had out on my little mob down in Cranham the last few weeks. What they are, what they ain't going to do to so-and-so. Sergeant Wright dealt with most of the Essex towns along the Thames, Tilbury, Grays and on into Raynham and Dagenham. Here it met and overlapped with the East London team's area of operations. Oh, I know that, Darryl. We know most of it's hotter amongst themselves and they all know how their world works and who is who. But this Tate guy, look, he's just got out the nick and he actually thinks he can take over the world. The problem is, he actually believes it. And Tucker will most likely rue the day he ever got involved if this fella doesn't get him killed or turn on him and do it himself. I'm telling you, this guy, he ain't sound of mind. Someone tried to put him down last year and missed. He's got history with Tucker. Together, They could be a handful, that's all I'm saying. Bill, you know that Tucker and Rolf have just borrowed 100 grand from Clive? Well, not actually his money, he's put a deal to some of his associates and told them he'll guarantee the money for a cut of the interest. Oh yeah, I got something about that as well from the chatter I picked up between Tucker and Rolf in the car a week ago. Is that going ahead then, the loan? The last that I heard is that Tate had introduced them to a guy that he was inside with called Mickey Steele. Steele reckons he can supply them with the pills and grass from Holland. It would appear that our Mickey has got access to a small fishing boat and will actually do the run himself, apparently. Sergeant Bell replied, "Well, Tucker's been steadily trying to work himself further and further up the supply chain over the last year. He ain't no fool. I suppose it's just good business sense in a way. You know, the closer you get to the actual supplier, the more people you cut out of the supply chain, the bigger your profits. He's got the end user access with his control of the clubs, so it's only natural he would try to go to the source for the goods. I am surprised that he needs to borrow to fund it though." D.I. Ellis spoke. "Trouble with these guys, they spend it as quick as they make it. If you want to start importing, then you have to pull up the cash and pay the piper. These Dutchmen ain't going to give credit, and they know if you lose the parcel on the way over, you're not going to want to pay for something you've not got. And it is a wholesale business, so you need a decent stake to get in. 100 grand sounds about right for a starter parcel from a serious supplier over in Holland to me." And that's how the sessions worked. Everyone was gathering their own material and would give input if they had it on any topic in hand. Darryl had the notes on it. "Oh yeah, the loan is happening, or happened. A couple of the old guard have chucked in. They think it's easy money. East London sent it over on Intel this morning. Two of the old guys are putting 50 grand apiece. They get 6% and Clive takes 4% to guarantee the debt. So Tucker has to pull up 10 grand a month and the loan's for 4 months only. But Tucker got them to agree he can give it back early and only pay for the time he's had it. He obviously fancies his chances with this gear from Tate's man. Oh, it's not a bad return, is it, for the lenders, and Clive will pay them if Tucker disappears, which is highly unlikely." Bill did the numbers in his head as he spoke. D.I. Ellis spoke up again. "Yeah, well, it's not that straightforward. Clive ain't stupid. He's the one who put the end date on the debt. He's not at risk as they're probably okay to pay for the first 4 months, even if they lose the gear on the way over. You see, he's told the old guard they have to deal with Tucker direct and just give him his 4 grand themselves unless there's a problem. What happens here is he gets 16 grand for nothing, as Tucker will pay the early payments for sure, even if he loses the parcel. Then when the 4 months are up, the old gits get greedy and offer to extend the loan, but they don't bother to tell Clive, so that way they get to keep all the interest for themselves. If Tucker defaults later, which will probably happen if he loses the gear, they can't go to Clive to collect it, as they've cut him out. Clive already knows this will happen, but he doesn't care because he's had his cut for no risk. Most likely scenario is Tucker will pay them for 7 or 8 months, then tell them they're knocked as he's lost a load or something. They'll have a meeting, he'll end up giving them a few quid at most. They won't be able to make so much noise for fear that Clive will find out that they've cut him out. The loan will have cost Tucker about 20 grand for the year, most of which went to Clive. Told you he was clever. D.I. Ellis was probably 100% right with his analysis, Bill reckoned. So it's happening then, or happened already. Tucker has or will have very shortly the stake for his first parcel from Holland. Bill summarised the situation. "Certainly looks that way, Bill. So you think this friend, associate of Tate, is going to be the transport or supplier for the business? What's his name, Steele?" "Steele, from what I've heard, yeah, he's the man of the hour. Tate has sort of muscled in a bit on Tucker's operation, so he wants to feel like he's bringing something to the table, and Steele and his Dutchman are the gifts he brings to the table. I have requested the file on Steele and any known associates. I'll bring him into the picture and see if I can't get a handle on when something might be heading our way." "Okay, good work, Bill. Now, Tom and Craig, I want you two to get up to speed on this with Bill. Tucker's got the outlets for a lot of product in Essex, and if he does get hooked into a serious supplier on the continent, then his profitability is going to be significant. It will certainly move him up a level or two, and if this Tate character is as dangerous as you think, Bill, then things might get quite interesting. We certainly don't want some sort of crazy power struggle going down on our turf and upsetting the status quo. The powers that be will want to know how this plays out, but for now, everyone, you are free to leave. Keep up the good work." With that, D.I. Ellis stood and headed back to his office. Bill had the remainder of the team's attention and said, "I came across Tucker's security firm a couple of years ago when I was with CID at Romford. We had what we thought was good intelligence. A lot of the gear was getting sold through the club, probably with at least the knowledge of the security firm, if not their direct involvement. The strange thing was, when we raided the place, we got nothing. It was as if they knew we were coming. The other thing was, anyone we ever questioned over possessions never came up with a name. Plenty of descriptions of movie stars, but nothing credible. So Tucker is by no means a mug. His dealers have plenty of respect from the punters out there, and he or someone else close to him may have been working with the old Bill. Detective Constable Firmin asked, "Okay, well, we have to focus on Tucker and Tate closely, and the other guy, what's his name?" "Craig Rolfe, and there's a few more players on their firm we need to keep closer tabs on as well. This Tate fellow has upped the tempo a fair bit on the whole firm. A couple of kids in town were a bit late with their payments. Nothing serious, and Tucker certainly wasn't losing any sleep over it. But Tate took it upon himself to hurt them both. One of them is still in hospital." "Well, we completely missed that one. How did that happen?" D.I. Ellis asked the obvious question. Bill, Firmin and Bartholomew had been all over Tucker and his crew's phones. The contract ones and the disposable pay-as-you-go burners. "Well, we had Tate and Steele together weekend before last. They met for Sunday lunch. Trouble is, we got nothing off of Tate's phone. Well, nothing from all three of them, just that we know that they had a meet. Steele doesn't ever say much when someone calls him. All he does is arrange to meet them. Tate usually gives a bit more away, especially after he's ended the call. He usually gives it large to whoever he's with, then brags about what they're doing for him. But where Steele is concerned, he doesn't say too much. I think it's because he is making Steele out to be his man. So it'd be a bit stupid to mug him off to the firm. And as he doesn't say anything good about anyone, that doesn't leave much for him to say." Bill didn't want it to sound like he was making excuses, but that's how it came out. "Did you get nothing from them in the restaurant?" D.I. Ellis was trying to work out how they'd completely missed the importation of 100 grams worth of Dutch grass and ecstasy pills, which were now already on the street, and causing considerable problems for the marketplace. "Well, we did try and clean up the recording, but there was just too much background noise in the restaurant. We do know that Tate went on to perform as usual, getting on it all day and being a general nuisance, before ending up in bed with some old bird who he gets on the coke with, but Steele went straight home after lunch. He did take his mobile with him to the restaurant, and as far as we know, he stayed home all evening. He hardly uses the mobile, and we now know that he doesn't always take it with him when he goes out, so we are a bit blind on him." Tony Firmin shrugged his shoulders as he finished the analysis of the team's problem when someone didn't make their life easy for them. He was backing Bill up on their lack of knowledge on the movements of Mickey Steele. "Well, have we any idea who his Dutch friends are or how he gets in touch with them?" D.I. Ellis was hoping for some good news. "No, we don't. I'm afraid there's nothing in the file. I mean, this guy's been around the business a long time, probably got some old contacts who are happy to do business with him. My guess is that he drives out to a phone box and makes the call. He's probably leaving the mobile at home while he does it. I mean, we can ask GCHQ to look at the phone boxes near his home, see if there are any calls going out to Holland. Maybe we'll get lucky in the future." It was the best Detective Constable Bartholomew could come up with in the way of technology input. The shit had just hit the fan big time, and although they had gotten onto the drug load once Tucker's gophers had collected it, they had completely missed the importation to the UK. "Well, I now believe that Steele is an independent. Tate thought he had him in his pocket, and to be honest, so did I. I was sure that I would have picked up enough from Tate to know when the load was coming in and how. The thing is, Steele is playing his cards really close to his chest, and obviously has the measure of Tate. He's also old school, so he's not so reliant on technology unlike the rest of them. Yeah, he's got a mobile, but he doesn't seem to take it everywhere with him. So after working that out, I didn't put too much significance on it being left in his kitchen while he was out and about. I thought when he was operating I would pick it up from one of Tate's phones. What I have found out, a bit late, and obviously I can only apologise for that, are some details regarding his fishing boat. He was out in it for 2 days last week. The official line that he spins is he's out fishing. But I would say it's a certainty he brought back a little bit more than mackerel or whatever the hell it is that swims about in the seas between here and Holland. The assumptions made by Bill were fairly close. They had missed Steele's move. The fish he went for, along with most of the other small boats using rod and line, were sea bass, not mackerel. Mackerel was more of a Cornish thing. The small fishing boats were common along the coast, and ideal for 2 or more guys taking a crate or 2 of beers, some flasks of coffee and a pile of sandwiches to sea. To spend the night out on the water. Drinking, fishing and telling tales were commonplace. Along the coastal region Steele kept the boat. Steele had owned the boat with a friend for years. She was a sturdy and seaworthy vessel. He was confident on the sea and knew how to navigate old style. No GPS or easy to track electronic gadgetry. The friend he owned it with took the boat out often, even while Steele was away at Her Majesty's pleasure. He was actually a fisherman, so the little craft never attracted any untoward attention when he had slipped out in early hours the week before on the Monday morning. She had crept easily into the small Dutch fishing port later that afternoon and took on 100 gallons of diesel. Tied up along the quay, 100 yards from the fuel depot, no one noticed a small van come alongside and load a number of boxes and large black sacks onto her rear deck, which were quickly stowed below in the tiny galley. Steele spent a cold night in the wheelhouse and then set out in the small hours before dawn broke fully. He was neatly tied up on his mooring on the east coast of England by mid-afternoon. No skulking around in the darkness. Steele knew his business and set about washing his decks down, the normal procedure from anyone who had been out night fishing. His trusted friend, who was not on any radar and didn't need to be telephoned 10 times a day, turned up with the nondescript Volvo estate to help unload the gear. Neither man talked much, they just went about the business. The load would be in Steele's slaughter in a couple of hours, safely out of sight. The next day, Steele had collected the boxes of pills. When Tate turned up at his house that afternoon, he handed them over. Pat Tate had given Steele the 100 grand on the previous Sunday afternoon when they'd met for lunch. The branch men had completely missed it all. 30 grand had gone on the pills and the remaining 70 on the Dutch weed. It was certainly a start. Tucker was now in the importation business. Well, almost. But Steele was keeping his Dutch contacts all to himself, for now at least it seemed. Tucker wasn't overly bothered in the short term and hadn't given much thought to dispensing with Steele in the food chain. Tate, on the other hand, wanted it all from the start, but would play along and play nice, he told himself, as he walked out of the man's kitchen with the box full of ecstasy pills. Those thoughts didn't survive the week for Pat Tate. Tucker had sent one of his guys to collect the bags of grass. It had been sent out to several of his dealers. By the weekend, the complaints were unilateral. The grass was junk. The first reports had come in the day after it went out. By the Friday morning, the main buyer, who was in for half the parcel, was in a car park in Essex. Tate was looking like a complete mug and started to feel uncomfortable. Tucker was issuing the refunds. He couldn't argue the case. The weed was rubbish. You've been listening to the book Once Upon a Time in Essex. This book is available to purchase online at Amazon and other online book retailers. Many thanks for joining me for this video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.